Hey, how's it going, guys? Jack and Matt here with the Toasty Bros, and today what we have for you is a 2021 step-by-step $500 gaming PC build guide.
No matter when you're watching this in 2021, this build guide will be useful in teaching you how to build this PC step by step. We're gonna be using a GoPro to give you some POV point of view to actually build this computer, and you'll be able to buy all these parts, link in the description down below, hopefully when parts come back in stock at the early parts of 2021 and later on in the year. But before we get into that, let's hear a word from today's sponsor. Today's video is brought to you by GVGMall, an online marketplace to gain access to some really awesome discounted game keys, and more specifically, Windows 10 licenses.
And if you're interested, use the link down below and buy the Windows 10 Pro activation using our code TB20 to get 20% off.
All you have to do to activate Windows 10 license is buy the key by using code TB20 and then throw the Windows 10 key into your Windows 10 activation on the system you wish to install it in, and boom, you have activated Windows 10 and you no longer have to look at that horrible watermark in the bottom right corner.
So thanks again to GVGMall for sponsoring this video.
Let's get right into the video, shall we?
And so real quick, just to talk about what exactly this build is, it is all new parts except for the RX 570, which we had some complications and had to buy a new one. But normally we recommend going with eBay used pricing because, well, these cards really don't get used that often and that much, so they end up being really good still. And you can usually get them from anywhere from like $90 to $120. Now with graphics card inflation, they might be a little bit more, but hopefully by the time this video comes out, you could get like an RX 580 or a GTX 1060 for the same price that we got this 570 for.
And the best part is the step-by-step guide will pretty much be exactly the same. You might have an extra power connector or two, but we'll explain that when we get to it. How about go and talk about each individual part and then get to building.
All right, so first up is the processor. We have the 10th gen Core i3. This is the i3-10100F. So if you're wondering what does the F mean, it basically just means it does not have integrated graphics. So it says discrete graphics required. That's why we have a graphics card. You could buy the regular 10100 and do the same thing. You could still add a graphics card, but usually they're just a little bit more. This one's actually supposed to be under $100. Right now, as of the time making this video, the 10100 is like 115 bucks. So if you get the 10100F for under $100, definitely go that route. Now for the motherboard, we have a lot of experience with these because we've been using the crap out of them and not a single one has had an issue. This is the MSI B460M-A Pro. What's awesome about this board is that it's a B460. It's not an H410 or anything. So, and this thing comes in under $80 typically, which is really good for a B460. Now for RAM, we have 16 gigs because that's what we always recommend now is dual channel. So always get 2 sticks, get 16 gigs. RGB is not essential, but it kind of adds FPS, right? So this is T-Force Delta RGB. It's 3200 megahertz, which technically this does not go past 3000 megahertz. So you don't need to get that high speed of RAM. You could also opt for non-RGB and save like 20 bucks. But for $20, we want to add as much RGB to this really cool case that Matt will talk about in a minute as we can. Now for storage, also have a lot of experience with these. I've never had an issue. The Crucial P2, which is just like the P1, but they're technically a little bit faster. It's NVMe, so yeah, lightning fast, 500 gigs. And these things are under $60 typically, usually around $50.99. So really good price for 500 gigs of lightning fast storage, and it plops right into the motherboard, which you'll get to see. We'll probably also show them how to install like an SSD as well, because most people are probably going to run a typical SATA drive. This is not the case with this. So you're gonna learn 2 different things today.
Now for the graphics card, we have the PowerColor RX 570. Now as Jackson mentioned at the beginning of this video, we normally recommend that you buy this used because you'll save a ton of money and there's a lot of them out there. You can buy them new, but you're gonna pay a premium for it. But the 570 can still play pretty much any game you want at 1080p high settings, sometimes medium low in some newer AAA titles, but it is still very capable. And if you are gonna be following this build guide, you most certainly can swap this for another GPU in the future, maybe like a 1660 Super or something like the newer 3000 series cards that may come out that are around this range, or even like an RX 580, that's also a good option. Now for the power supply, we have the Corsair VS 500 watt power supply, which comes with nice black sleeve cables. It is 500 watts and it comes from Corsair, which is a highly reputable company when it comes to power supplies. 500 watts is more than enough for this 570 i3 combo and pretty much any other GPU upgrade you want to do in the future, as long as you don't do like a 3070 or 3080 or anything crazy like that. Don't do that. But 500 watts is more than enough and we're happy to use it in this PC build. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is an interesting case. This is the MX7 from Mustex. Now Mustex is a company that sells on Amazon. They sell a lot of their RGB cases on Amazon for a really good price. This is one of their newer cases that we saw, which is more like a cube design. It fits micro ATX motherboards perfectly. Comes with these 2 RGB fans in the front with filtering up front, and tempered glass. And it comes in at a really awesome price point. So, I mean, we're excited to build in it. It's definitely a unique case. For these builds, you can go with a wide range of cases, but the fact that this is readily available on Amazon makes it a perfect candidate for this PC build guide, because you all at home can go ahead and pick these parts out and be sure to follow along at home. So let's go ahead and start with the motherboard.
All right, guys, so we are now at step 1 of the process. We have not done anything yet. We're gonna go ahead and open the box. For this, we suggest a knife, a pair of scissors. We use X-Acto knives because they're very sharp, although this one's really dull. So, opening up this Intel i3, they're all the exact same mounting. Intel has been using the same stock cooler since the Intel i-series came out, to my knowledge. So you might be able to buy some aftermarket coolers and whatnot if you need them, but we don't need it for this. We're just gonna go with stock cooler. So processors here, coolers here. All right. So the motherboard's always going to come with a couple SATA cables, sometimes more depending on how high end the board is, and an I/O shield. So the I/O shield is important. We will get to that, but just don't forget this. Don't throw it away. Don't do anything with it yet. The SATA cables, we told you, we're not using a SATA drive. So we're going to show you how to install these, but you're not going to need them as well. So we like to close the box, and because the box is technically an anti-static surface to an extent, we are going to open up the motherboard and slap it onto the box. Now, I think Matt and I can both agree we like to always start with the CPU, but you can do this in like any order. So Intel is different than AMD. Intel, essentially their CPUs, which I'm gonna go ahead and open. See, now I can open it. So cooler, very similar to AMD, but they don't use screws. Intel just pushes into place. And it has thermal paste pre-applied. That's very common. Any stock cooler that you buy is very likely going to have thermal paste installed. So, Intel i3, look at this. There's no pins on the bottom. These are just pads that make contact with the pins under this. So, I'm gonna repeat this step. We're going to get this off. I know that this is removed, but don't remove it yet. If you do remove it, it's not the end of the world, but I've learned better. Just leave that on for now. You're going to open this up. There's no pins in the CPU, so we don't have to worry about bending pins, but still, you know, be a little bit cautious with it. Grab it by the sides, don't grab it by the traces, because you might get some goop on there and cause some contact issues. So if you see these two little notches, those are gonna line up with the two little notches here, or there is an arrow right here. You see that arrow? And then there's also an arrow right here, which is really small now that I'm looking at it, but very small arrow. So we are literally just going to drop this into place. You see these notches, how they're lining up? That's one of the most important parts. So we know that that's in. You're going to take the bracket like this, and it's going to be painful. And then that is going to pop off oh my God, look at that. But yeah, so now it is holding pressure down. It's making sure all the pins are making good contact. If you have AMD, it's going to be the same sort of process, except AMD does not have that bracket that holds the CPU down. AMD just has a little bracket that you pull up, and the pins are on the processor. They're not actually on the motherboard like this, but same sort of process. If you guys can handle this, you can handle AMD. Now, Intel's coolers are a little bit different than AMD. They don't use screws. They actually just use these little push pins. I personally like to undo this. You don't have to do this step at all, which actually this might, no, it's gonna hit the fan. It's always a little short. It's gonna hit the fan. So we're gonna undo this real quick. This is not like an essential step. You could run this any way you want. I personally like to go under this, but be cautious. You do not wanna go across the pad, because if that gets on the CPU, your CPU is not gonna be making contact. So kind of hold these off to the side, and then you're literally just gonna drop the CPU cooler on there. And now watch what I do here. You should do this with any type of cooler. You wanna do opposite corners. And you hear that nice click, and kind of press down just to make sure it's in. Opposite corners again. Look at that. I should be able to pick the cooler up and shake it, and it's not gonna move. AMD is the same way. AMD uses screws instead, but you should be able to pick the actual motherboard up by the CPU cooler, and it shouldn't move. So you see how that's just a little bit cleaner. These cables are really ugly, and there's not much you can do with them, but running it under just makes it to where you're not running that ugly cable all the way across the board. So next up, you know, Matt, what do you think? Should we do the M.2 or the RAM next?
Let's do RAM.
RAM, I like the RAM. The RAM's a fun step. I think M.2 is probably my least favorite step. I don't know why, but RAM, we're gonna go ahead and open the box up. We only have 2 DIMMs. Now, what this is dual channel. There's only 2 slots on the board. Some boards have 4 slots. Some even have 8, but you're probably not gonna really ever see any of those. So the big difference is 4 sticks is more expensive than 2 because it technically runs in quad channel, and well, it's more manufacturing for them to do. So we just usually suggest doing dual channel, but hey, totally up to you guys. Look how beautiful that stuff is. We got some white RAM for this, but there's a lot of different colors you can get. It is RGB, so fully controllable by software. So this is DDR4 RAM, and there's a little slot in the middle. That's one of the most important parts to line up, and I think Matt will be able to show you guys this. So right now, this is wrong. Do you see how that slot is not lining up with the other slot? If I try to push this in, it's just not gonna work. It's gonna sound painful, and you could break it. So this is the proper way to do it. Now, some boards you can undo this one too, you undo both sides. This one's not like that. I don't really like the boards that do this, but it's fine. Now watch this bracket as I push down. You gotta use a lot of force, by the way. See, I popped in. It doesn't sound great, it doesn't feel great, but it works, and you don't often really mess up installing the RAM. If you ever have an issue where your computer's just not booting and you just built it, there's a good chance that you did not seat the RAM in all the way. Like right now, I don't know if you guys can tell, but this RAM is not seated all the way. You see how this one's slightly up and this bracket is still open? So, once again, very painful. You just break the RAM in there. But no, we know that the RAM's installed properly, so now the last step on the motherboard is the M.2. Now, another question that some of you guys might have that I'm gonna have Matt answer is, can you put together a motherboard after you install it into the computer case?
Yes, you can, if you really want to. It's not recommended because it's much easier to work outside the case, and if you want to be very careful and make sure all your components work, you technically can test it outside the case on the motherboard box if you want to. We normally don't do that because most of the time we trust that our PC parts are gonna work, but the times that we have issues, that probably would have better that we did that. But regardless, it is better to do everything outside of the case because you'll probably get a cleaner experience. You will be less likely to mess up pins on the CPU. It's easier to get RAM installed, and yeah, you overall have a better experience.
So this normally doesn't happen, but there's supposed to be a little riser right here that sits on the M.2. It came off with the screw. It's fine. We're just gonna use a pair of needle nose, and look at that. We're taking off the screw now so we can put the riser back in like it's supposed to. All this means is that whoever designed this board, not whoever designed it, whoever put this board together at the factory just did not screw in this all the way. So I'm just using a pair of pliers. We're just gonna tighten it down a little bit so this doesn't happen again, and boom, just like that. So now the last step of the motherboard, and then we're totally done touching the motherboard for now. We're gonna open up this M.2, and boom. Now keep in mind, if you're doing SATA drive, you're gonna use these guys right here. Any of these ports you can use for your SATA connector, and that's how your hard drive or SSD will work. But here we have an M.2 NVMe SSD. So what's cool about these is they're tiny, first of all, and they do not use any additional cables. There's no cables whatsoever for them. They literally just slide into place. So we have a notch right here. You literally can't mess it up because, well, yeah, it wouldn't work. So you're going to basically take it, kind of push it down a little bit, and then push in, and then it should sit flush on this bracket. Some boards, you're just going to take the screw and screw it straight on. That's it, you're done. This one though, it has a little heat sink on it, which guys, for an SSD like this, it does not do anything. They're not really that important, but it does cover it and make it look a little cleaner. So you're going to just line up exactly how you took the screws off. You see how we have that going there. We're gonna get this screw back in first. Boop, boop. And then we take our other screw, which should just thread right into place. And by the way, guys, with computer stuff, don't ever tighten anything down too tight. A lot of people, they just take these screwdrivers and they're like double fisting them. You should be able to get it hand tight with just a single 2 fingers. If you're doing any more than 2 fingers, you're likely stripping the screw out. You're going way too ham, and yeah, you're going crazy. So hey, we now have a finished motherboard. We have the CPU with the CPU cooler installed. We have the RAM installed, and we have the M.2 installed. Like I said, the actual RAM and the SSD, you really can't do any differently. You might have an aftermarket cooler. That's a whole nother story. And they all install differently. They never use stock mounting. It's always kind of weird. So keep that in mind if you're buying a different cooler.
Okay, I'm up next, guys. What we're gonna be looking at today is this power supply from Corsair. So what we're gonna be doing is installing the power supply in the case. That's normally the next best step. We're going to unbox this thing.
What color cables does it have?
It has black cables. I think I mentioned that at the beginning, but you know what? I could be wrong here. Power cord, hang on to this, very important. And then inside here, we have the power supply. Now, in this case, we are using a non-modular power supply. So that just makes our, well, cable management job a little bit harder. Semi-modular versus non-modular, is basically the difference between having all these cables plugged in and some of them not plugged in at the same time. For most people, a non-modular power supply is perfectly fine, but as we mentioned, it is requiring most of the time a little bit more cable management. So nice cables, flat cables, just as I mentioned. We're gonna move all this stuff out of the way and go to our computer case here. So inside the computer case, we're gonna go ahead and take these thumb screws off. You can see right here, it's more likely you're gonna see more GoPro footage than Jackson right now, but we're gonna go ahead and unscrew these two screws right here. Pull this side panel off, and normally you could just like set it somewhere. We'll just put it like right over here. This is probably a good place. And then we're gonna move these to the side. Do not lose those screws. It's very easy to do. And we're gonna go ahead and insert the good old power supply, which actually we're gonna go this way. So it looks a little bit better.
Came over here,
yeah, we're gonna go ahead and do it this way because it'll make things look a little bit better. So we're gonna pull this, oh my goodness, cable mess out of here. So it looks like the hub is not attached by default, which is kind of sketch in my opinion. I think we're probably just gonna do it like,
I guess it's cool in case you want to put it somewhere specific.
yeah, so we'll show you how to do that in a little bit, but we're gonna go ahead and install the power supply. The power supply goes right here in the power supply basement. So what we're gonna be doing is making sure to do fan side down because it allows it to pull air from the bottom, which it has a little bit of an intake spot, especially if you have it on a desk. Don't put this PC on carpet because it won't be great for airflow. We're gonna go ahead and slide this power supply in like so, being sure to line up, if I can get it in all the way, being sure to line up these screw holes right here. And what we're gonna be using to screw this in is what we like to call power supply screws, which is especially included with this beautiful case. You do always get a packet of screws. It looks like Jackson's doing something at the moment.
I'm just getting an extra light.
Oh, extra light, here we go.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard to see what's going on. Right.
There we go. So we got an extra light going on here so y'all can see a little bit better. But inside this bag, we have screws. Yay. And I'll show you what a power supply screw looks like. Actually, I'll show it to Jackson because he can probably get a finer look at what we're working with here. This right here is a coarse thread screw or a power supply screw. Can you get that? You got it?
Yeah, and then you want to compare it to a fine thread?
This, ladies and gentlemen, is a fine thread. See, it's tiny. The threading is different. I'll try to hold it up like so. Maybe. Yes, there you go. Kinda.
Try throwing it on the table too, and I can
There,
really
on the
get, like,
table.
a good...
So y'all can see the difference there real quick. Good
So yeah, fine thread, you'll notice that the threading is much closer together than the coarse thread that's in the back.
So now we're gonna go ahead and screw this power supply in. Just use a normal Phillips. What size Phillips is this, Jackson?
PH2.
PH2, normally a good recommended Phillips screwdriver for building a PC. For most things, this is all you're gonna really need. Those M.2 sometimes need a smaller one, P1, but everything else is normally this. So we're gonna go ahead and finish screwing this in. There are normally 4 slots to screw this in, or screw holes, whatever you wanna call them. I like to call them slots because that makes absolutely no sense. So we're gonna keep screwing this in real quick, and while we're doing that, we're gonna talk about wattage because a lot of people overestimate the amount of wattage they need in their PC build. This PC, I would guess, is probably gonna pull anywhere from like 250 to 300 watts on full load, which is like way more headroom than you need to do some upgrades in the future. I know a lot of people who may build a PC like this may say, you know what? Let's put a 750 watt power supply in here. And then they spend way more money than they need to, and it does not really use nearly that much. For upgradability, that's cool, but 500 watts is a pretty common amount of wattage that works in a ton of different builds and will be perfectly fine for this PC.
Another thing you can do is look up TDP, which is thermal, was it thermal draw power?
Sure.
Am I thinking of the right one? Anyways, sure. TDP though is basically like the max power it should pull at max load. So for example, that i3, if I'm not mistaken, and Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, 65 watt.
65.
Now 570 is probably like what, like 175 watts maybe?
Yeah, give or take.
So you can kind of add those together. And then typically for like the motherboard and all the other accessories, they say to add anywhere from like, I think it's like 50 to 100 more watts. Yeah. And that'll kind of give you an idea on what the max load will be. That does not mean it's not always going to run at that. We actually have a watt meter right over there under the desk, so that every time we build a PC, we get to see how many watts these builds pull. You gotta remember, we've built like over 500 PCs. We know exactly how many watts each one of these pulls, and we have never exceeded what we needed.
I have no comment about this. Choose a gift. Laser pointer, light show, flashlight.
Not gonna lie, I thought she was not wearing a shirt at first.
So there we go, like, that goes on the floor. But hey, you know what? This is something Jackson's gonna like.
Yeah, look at that.
I think it's actually
now, how does that work? Oh, so that's like a pull.
So it's like a little pull thing. I have to like, there you go.
Kind of unnecessary, but
yeah, so there you go.
It's there.
It's a thing, it's magnetic. So now that we have the power supply installed, we're gonna go ahead and install this motherboard. Now, if you wanna be if you wanna be extra safe with this case, you can pull this glass off really easily and move it to the side. I would recommend that. So we're gonna walk over here real quick and put that down.
So yeah, you can see he's gotten the back panel and the front panel off. That's pretty important for building a PC. Just go ahead and take them both off at the start. and you're gonna be much happier with how easy it is.
So here's the motherboard, looking really nice. One thing you have to do, and I almost did it. I almost made a mistake.
I was gonna let him
is
do it.
Install the I/O shield. I actually did this morning when I was building a PC over at PCBros.tech. Check that out. But we do come with I/O shields, I promise. What you want to do is install the I/O shield. Now, a quick way to just test where it needs to go is, well, look at the motherboard, make sure it lines up. But a good rule of thumb is that the audio jacks are normally at the bottom. So what you can go ahead and do is, I'll try to get a good angle in here. You see this slot right here. Jackson has an angle outside, I have one inside. You're gonna go ahead and put this right here like.
They never go in easy, keep that in mind. It's going to be difficult, especially for your first few times. Like, you're gonna think that you're doing something so wrong, but trust me, it's hard.
Just make sure you go all the way around, make sure it's all popped in, because this is the one thing that can just pop out on you randomly. But it does look like my I/O shield is in and ready to go. Now we can install the motherboard, which in this case should be pretty simple. It is a micro ATX case and a micro ATX motherboard, so it should fit nice and snug. As you can see, there are standoffs already ready to go here. One for micro ATX, one for mini ITX. So we have to make sure that there's no extra ones. I'm already thinking I see an extra one right now because it looks a lot like some of the other cases we had. We might need to move that. So we're gonna go ahead and, yep, that's definitely an extra one. So important thing, big brain thing. This is something that may be kind of annoying, but you may need to remove this little riser right here. It does say it's for micro ATX, but with this motherboard, we have noticed it doesn't actually have a hole there. It just sits on top of it and has, well, conductivity issues. That could cause a lot of problems. So
yeah, you want to show the back of the board and show why that's bad.
So if you look at the back of the board, there's all these traces here. So you guys can see all this. And if this metal makes contact with one of these traces, it can cause a short or it cause a lot of damage to your motherboard. It won't post, things like that. So it's very important with some of these cases that have pre-installed mounting hardware to make sure that you get rid of all the extra standoffs so you don't damage your board. Now with this case, you definitely need to do it. Sadly, most other cases probably won't have this issue, but again, this case, for some reason, you have to do it. So we're gonna go ahead and do that real quick. You can do it with just a pair of little needle nose right here, super easy. But if you do happen to have a tool that sometimes comes with different builds, it's like a little cover that goes over top of it. This might actually have
It basically just uses a socket, but it's a really small socket. It's like it's smaller than 1/4 inch. I think David the other day said it was like 9/32 or something like that. It's a very small standard size screw, or it could even be metric, I don't know.
So we're gonna go ahead and slowly do this. If you have that tool, you can definitely get this done a lot faster, but as long as it gets loosened enough, we can pop that out and we can actually move it up to this other slot right here, which is simple as you can do it with your fingers. You can just go ahead and screw it in. Just keep in mind, you probably wanna use the needle nose because it's hard to get finger tight the way you need to. And if you try to screw the motherboard in, sometimes if you try to unscrew the motherboard, it comes with it. So you wanna make sure this is nice and snug, which I feel like I'm pretty close to that point. That feels nice and snug. And now we won't have any issues. Let's try this again, shall we? Install the motherboard, let's go. All right. Now, one thing to keep in mind with the I/O shield, there's these brackets on here. I'll be honest with you, most of the time I move them out of the way. They are designed to just kind of hold the I/O shield in place with the motherboard, but for one like this Ethernet port, I normally just like pull that up because it just normally gets in the way and causes more problems than good. So we're gonna do that, and we're gonna make sure that everything is lined up. As you can see right here, it does look like everything's lined up. You have access to all your USB ports and your Ethernet jack and your headphone jack, all that sort of fun stuff. So that is good to go. And there we go. All the holes line up for the motherboards. We have one right here, 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 and here. So now I don't know for sure if this uses coarse or fine thread. I'm gonna make a bet that it is fine thread. That's normally the types of screws they use. If you saw at the beginning of the video what a fine thread looks like, there it is. Magnetic screwdrivers, by the way, very useful, very useful. So we're gonna go ahead and screw one of these bad boys in to make sure, and it does feel like it's gonna be a fine thread. Once again, do not tighten it too much. You don't wanna do any damage to the board, but just tighten it up.
See how he's using 2 fingers?
Super easy.
That's
super
important.
easy. So there we go. There's one screw in. In this build, I think, I don't really like how far away this is right here, this right here. I don't know if we're gonna do a behind the board kind of deal.
So yeah, normally guys, Matt and I are perfectionists. They include holes to run everything through. However, we may run some stuff behind the motherboard and onto the board. It's gonna look weird, but you guys will see why and what we do.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna go ahead and transition to that.
One screw, just keep one screw in so the board doesn't fall out.
We'll leave one screw in, we're going to see that. But again, as Jackson mentioned, when he's showing you the cable management section, you're gonna be going through and running the power supply, not the power supply, the 24 pin behind the motherboard, but you could just run it through here if you wanna just keep it safe. I mean, you don't have to do it the other way, but just one thing to keep in mind. Yeah, I think it's time to transition to Jackson again. You're back on deck.
Woo. So we're back to the Jackson cam once again, and cable management, I'm gonna be honest with you guys, is probably one of the hardest parts of the build. And you can make it really easy. A lot of people do make it a little bit too easy that we see in our Discord when we do the PC judging and all that. But right now though, this build looks really clean and we wanna keep it that way. So we could go ahead and install the graphics card, which Matt usually does, but we're not going to because we only put one screw in the board. We do not want to fit a screw in the board. If you put in the graphics card, it gets screwed down. We won't be able to move the motherboard. We're leaving the motherboard loose because we're going to be running a few things behind the motherboard, which, like Matt said, it's a little bit unconventional. You're not going to see a lot of pre-build companies do that because, well, if anybody ever wants to upgrade this or anything or change out the power supply because it dies, it does suck. You have to take out a lot of things. I'm going to simply loosen the motherboard here. I might even have to kind of take it out. I don't know yet. That should be loose enough. Just be careful with this step, guys, because your motherboard could like fall out of the build. So 24 pin, I'm pushing the board slightly to get this through, but look at that. We got it through. And do you see how much cleaner this is going to be than running it all the way through here? Because look, we just have to turn it around and then plug it in, which is the wrong way right now. But let's go ahead and get this plugged in. This is a hard, not fun step. So we got her turned around and you guys probably couldn't hear it, but it did click into place. But look how clean that looks. I mean, come on, come on. All right, so now usually you're only probably gonna be one person building, but hey, sometimes people build with friends. Now, I like to ask Matt where certain things are. I already know the CPU is up top and he'll probably would have showed that. You'll get to see my angle from the back. That's going to go right through here. Almost all cases have that. I often just kind of like to run things through, but I'm gonna actually plug them in one at a time. Normally we run everything through and then plug it in. This one's gonna be a little bit difficult, isn't it?
I think so, all those fans.
Not too difficult. I didn't realize this thing came with all these RGB fans. It's pretty cool, but also a little bit in the way. All right, we got it.
Beautiful.
And look at that, that's very clean. Oh God, very clean as well. Next up, we have all of this stuff. So this is all the things that are on top of your board. You have the power button, reset switch, LED changing button, USB 3, and audio jack. So I'm just gonna give you guys a quick rundown on what all this is, and you can usually just tell by looking. We have HD audio, it says on there, USB 3. This does not have USB 2 on it, so a USB 2 port, by the way, looks just like HD audio, but they don't plug into each other. And then we have all of the front panel stuff, so reset switch, power switch, just everything you can think of. Now, one thing I do wanna check, this motherboard does actually, this case does have the LED switch plugged into here. Some cases use the reset switch to go to the hub to change, but this one has a separate switch for that. So that's good, good on them. All right, so now let's go ahead and run, where's USB 3 at, Matt?
USB 3 is probably best underneath the 24 pin.
All right, that's easy access because we still have the board loose. I'm gonna go ahead and run the HD audio underneath, and we're just gonna come around and unplug this all at once. Did I get that through? Okay, and then the last thing we need to run through, and then that's really it besides PCI, which we will go ahead and do that as well. But the last thing aside from the PCI connector is the front panel stuff. And well, once again, I don't love, do you see how far away? Front panel is right here, JFP1. I don't really wanna run it through here because, well, it's just kind of ugly. It's a little bit too far for me. So watch what I do and watch when the cables come out from Matt's angle. I'm going behind the motherboard and Matt, are we out?
Yep, I see them.
All right, and so we have all of those cables here and then we can just do this. Look how much cleaner that's going to be running behind the board. So once again, where'd the HD audio go?
On it.
Oh, it fell out. All right, let's go ahead and plug this stuff in because it's just gonna keep falling out. So HD audio, there's one pin missing from the top that you cannot plug in. That is the way it's gonna go. The top one where it's missing. This one also could probably be a little bit cleaner running behind the board, but honestly, I'm over it. So this part's kind of hard, guys. It's not hard, but it's a little bit hard to see.
I'm gonna show them the diagram.
Do you see how tiny that diagram is? Maybe we can get a way to pop it up on the screen.
Can see it.
All right, so to plug all that stuff in, there's a bird outside going crazy, by the way, guys. It's going crazy.
Crazy for the toaster.
So reset switch is going to be this guy here because the very last pin stays open as the diagram shows. Hard drive LED is going to go here. There is a positive and negative for that. Power switch and reset switch do not have polarities, but the hard drive LED and power LED do. So let's see, we have negative, that's going to go here. Boop, boop. All right, and then positive goes here. All right, and then last is the power switch, which is probably the most important to make sure you get plugged in the right spot. They're usually always in the same spot, by the way, guys. This stuff doesn't change too often. But yeah, look at that.
So to recap, once again, you can look at this diagram. We'll show you because I know that's kind of hard to see. You have the power LED on the left, positive, negative. You have the hard drive LED right below it. Then right next to that is the power switch, and below that is the reset switch. You can pause right here, look at this diagram. That is the simplest way to copy that.
All right, and then the last thing I'm gonna go ahead and run behind the board, and then I'll let Matt do the next step with the graphics card, is the PCI, because this graphics card is either, it's going to likely, this is a 570, so it's probably just gonna use a single 8-pin or 6-pin, which, see how it just breaks off? So sometimes they have a spot like right here that's cut out because the graphics card's gonna go here and you can run up there, but they don't. So I'm either thinking here or running it behind the board, which I'm kind of liking. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sure.
You like that? Okay. So you could run it either spots. Once again, a lot of this stuff is very up to you guys, like whatever you are feeling like doing. But I'm gonna go behind the board for this one, and after that, we can finally screw the board in, which I guess that's something that Matt can also do.
I can handle that.
Smile.
Now, one downside by running it behind the board, as you might see, is there is a slight bulge that does occur sometimes, but it is not an issue. It definitely can be pushed down, and these cables are definitely very sturdy to the point where it's not really going to be anything that's going to damage them.
The good news is this one's actually going to have no bulge. We did pretty good at running everything. We didn't run any cables on top of each other, so I just want to show you guys with the main camera what the back looks like. So if we did run these cables over top of each other, yes, there'd be a really bad bulge. You might not be able to screw it in, but you see how we ran them aside each other? So it's okay. And now, oh yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and unplug this too because I'm gonna show you guys why. This is if you wanna run RGB on the motherboard. We're not doing that. This thing has a very convenient LED button to change. So why would we want that? We don't. Just get rid of it.
Goodbye.
All right, up to Matt.
Okay guys, I'm back. So what we're gonna be doing is screwing in the rest of the motherboard. Now you can do this laying down or standing up. We're gonna do it standing up because, well, that's what we do here. Take with that as you wish. We're gonna go ahead and screw this in. We got the topmost slot up there. We normally have two up here. We have the one we already screwed in. We have blah, 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 blah. Yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and screw these in. And now while we're doing this, we're gonna talk about some cable management that we're gonna be doing here in a little bit. After we get the graphics card in, cable management is the one thing that takes a lot of time. You could put zero effort into it, or you could just go crazy and do a ton of cable management, which we're gonna go ahead and do a ton of cable management. But just because that's gonna take almost like a while to do, and it's really hard to explain every little step of the way, we're gonna probably time-lapse that method and just show you some general tips here and there that we recommend for cable management. But cable management is something that you can just commonly just kind of do yourself. I mean, you just gotta see where cables run, make sure that they're tied up nicely, use a lot of zip ties, and you can make a really nice Toasty Bros approved PC.
Now, one thing I do want to show you guys, just because we do have one extra step in this that we didn't have before. We do have this RGB hub here. This is not going to come with every build. I don't want you guys thinking this is always in here. This is just because we bought this kind of cool Mustex case that has a total of 5 RGB fans installed. That's why these guys here are each fan. So yeah, normally this is not going to be here if you don't buy a case with RGB, but keep in mind, if you do, be prepared to have a lot of crazy stuff looking like this.
So now that we have finished screwing in the motherboard, no missing screws. Yeah, if you really wanted to, you could just not screw all of them in, but you don't have to do that. What we're gonna be doing here, which now that I see this, I am in pain right now, is another one of these cases that you have to remove the vertical bracket to install a GPU normally. So it looks like all we have to do is remove this screw here, and I assume probably the other ones, but this whole piece might just come out. Actually, this whole piece might just come out. Oh, one screw. Oh, look at that.
That's convenient.
There we go. If you're gonna include the vertical mount, at least make it easy to remove. So there, that's gone. If you do want to install it vertically, you will need like a riser cable and all that sort of stuff. We ain't into that here at the Toasty Bros. So we're gonna go ahead and just install it normally.
Especially not with a 570.
Yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and get the 570 out of its box and then see exactly what we need to do here. There's an X-Acto knife still, so I'm gonna go ahead.
I mean, I told you those are important. People forget this stuff.
Very, very important. And then here we go, the power color
nice
variant.
570.
Yes.
That's how much was this again, Matt?
So we paid a lot of money for this new. I think we ended up paying like $180, which is very expensive for a 570 right now.
To give you an idea, you can get a new 1650 Super for that same price, which performs a lot better. Good looking card though.
Look at that, 8-pin. Remember what Jackson said, 8 or 6-pin? That's what we're working with right now. Doesn't have a backplate, which is kind of meh, but whatever. So what we're gonna go ahead and do is see where this graphics card slots in. So what you gotta do is, well, you're gonna slot it in here, obviously.
I'm gonna show you guys the other angle. So he's saying we need to see which PCI brackets we need to remove.
So yes, once you line it up here, you can tell it's just the top two.
Yep,
Top two is what you gotta do. What I like about this case is none of these are break-off ones. All of these are screwed in, which is really nice. Sometimes they have ones where you have to like bend them back and forth to get them to pop out, and then you can't put them back in. You have to get actual ones like this that use a screw and can be put in. So this is a sign of high quality, or at least
Another thing I really like is there's not a huge lip on the case. Some of these cases, after you get your graphics card installed, if you're wondering why you're not getting HDMI or display pulled out, it's because these right here often have a really big bump on them, so when you try to plug it in, it's not going in all the way.
Now, graphics card install is almost as simple as installing RAM. You wanna go ahead and line up this little slot right here with this one right here, and you're gonna go ahead and do that like so, push in, and you should hear a click. A lot of stuff in PC building is about hearing the click. Once you hear the click, you're good to go. Now, I don't know what Jackson's angle is looking like as far as lip goes. Does it look pretty clean to where I can just screw it in as is?
Yeah, no, that's actually really good. They designed this case really well, and it's flat before it hits the lip. Some of these, so yeah, I just want to really show you guys because like this is awesome. You see how this is flat right here, but then you get a little bit of a bump? Some of these cases, it goes straight into a freaking mountain, and it is god-awful.
So we're gonna go ahead and put those same two screws that we removed for those covers back onto the graphics card. And as of right now, the graphics card is installed. Ooh. All we have to do next is plug in the power connector. Now, normally with these kind of power supplies that have the 2 8 pins, one trailing off, I normally like to use this connector because you can easily tie this one over here and make it look super clean. And what we can do here, it doesn't look like I have a spot to actually tie it off onto the graphics card. That's a little cheeky little thing that we've done before. But what you're going to do is just go ahead and take this 1 8 pin, make sure that this little +2 on the 6 pin is actually connected. There you go. And what you're gonna do is line up this slot with this notch or whatever. Yeah, great terminology, Matt.
Notch is my favorite Minecraft.
And then you're gonna go ahead and click, boom, good to go. And then when we get to cable management, I'm gonna go ahead and get a zip tie that right there, and then we can pull that there, and boom, where's the cable? Can't see it. Well, you can now, but it'll look a lot better when we get to cable management portion, which I guess I'll go ahead and start by doing that. So zip ties.
This is all you, man. All
very important.
You're on this.
We already had this bag open, but as you can tell, we use a lot of zip ties.
They're getting ready to see the meanest time lapse for the rear of the PC.
Yes. So here we go. This right here is going to be.
And then also, let's not forget to reinstall this because that is a big hole.
Good point. You know what? Sometimes we forget these things. So where did I put that? Didn't I just throw that thing?
No, I don't think, you didn't just throw it.
Okay, I didn't throw it. I didn't actually do that.
bad.
So make sure you don't lose the screw. I think this is the screw. Hopefully, we'll find out. We're going to go ahead and reinstall this thing real quick by just putting these little things right here. And then lining that up, maybe. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, line that up like so. Taking this screw, which I think is the right screw. About to find out real quick.
Oh, maybe it's not course thread then?
Maybe, I mean, it went in pretty nicely.
No,
okay, there we go. It's in. Woo! Did it. Now let's do what I was actually going to do and cable manage this. So zip ties are your friend, ladies and gentlemen. So what we're going to do here is hide this little extra connector because, well, the cable's not long enough to actually pull that all the way back through. So what we're going to do is take this little beautiful zip tie, wrap it around here, zip it off. Maybe, if I can actually get this to feed through. Okay, and then you're going to tighten it like so. Okay, normally I like to do 2 of them, one right here and then one up here just to like make this look a little cleaner. And then you go back with some little snippy snips right here and just go snip, snip. We'll try to leave links to some recommended tools in the description down below that are pretty cheap. There's like some PC building tools you can get. I don't really know if they'll come with like these little snips, but they'll come with most of the stuff that you need to build your first PC. And honestly, this stuff is kind of extra at this point. If you're building a lot of computers, it could be worth investing into, but honestly, you could just use scissors if you wanted to cut this if you don't want to invest in these nice little snip snips. And like so, it's good to go. Now Jackson's gonna probably pull this cable back through a little bit on his end when he does some cable management, but this looks pretty nice. It definitely could be nicer if there was a little cutoff point. We've actually done something where we used to zip tie it to the actual graphics card if there's a opening on the plastic shroud, but it appears there is not.
You might be able to actually do one through here.
Oh, yeah, wait, we actually have PCB mounting right here. Oh boy, PCB mounting. So again, extra stuff, we like to do this sometimes, is through here, we can lift this bad boy up, pull this back through. This is like a double maneuver.
And like Matt said, this is not an essential step, and it, for some people, could even seem risky. So don't feel the need to do it if you don't want to. But
just what we like to do.
Yeah, we've never had problems doing it. Also, for shipping purposes and moving around, it does actually help having the PCI connector. Look, the USB 3 came on. It does help having the PCI connector actually attached to the graphics card because it acts as an extra support, almost like a spring or bungee.
So this isn't as like tight as I want it to be, but it does look a little bit nicer. So go ahead and do that. USB 3 got undone for some reason. Make sure USB 3 actually goes in. I probably just didn't push it in hard enough when I was trying to do it while holding the camera. So there we go. And yeah, we'll go ahead and snip that real quick like. And yeah, just looks a little bit better. It's like hidden up on that graphics card. Looks pretty decent. Now what we're gonna go ahead and do, I'll go ahead and just go over the basics of cable management. Jackson is the cable management expert here at the Toasty Bros, but the basics that we're gonna be doing here is honestly just trying to bundle some of these up. Make sure we have some clean runs. Normally we like to pull like the CPU off to the side right here. We like to keep everything somewhat together that comes down from the front IO. We wanna attach it to the 24 pin most of the time, and if there's any like tie off points, these little points right here, great for zip ties to be able to hold it to the back of the board. And the main thing is to try to organize the cables the best you can and utilize that power supply basement. If there's any cables you're not using, trust me, it's super easy just to like, you know, just do this. Just shove. Super easy. Any other points that you want to talk about real quick?
This PC is actually ready to turn on, ready to go. One thing I will say is your RGB will not work. Matt, you want to show them how to plug that in? This is a SATA connector, SATA power connector.
So RGB, SATA power connector.
This powers the hub right here, which we're gonna cable manage well.
Yeah, cable management is now the next step, and for some reason this fell off the bottom. These seem to fall off a lot.
Let's do it.
All right, guys, now that we have the PC all put together, look at that beautiful RGB. Now, as you mentioned, you can change the RGB by just hitting the LED button that is included. Super easy. As long as this works, it's perfectly fine. If for some reason you do turn a computer on, your RGB is not working, make sure you have it powered on. Make sure that SATA power cable is plugged into the hub, and just make sure everything's working right. But look at that. This case looks really nice. Honestly, I'm very impressed with this case. How about we just go ahead and test it in a couple of games and see how she performs.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, now that we have this $500 gaming PC all put together, let's talk about some benchmarks real quick. Now, we decided to test this PC in a handful of titles, those being Call of Duty Cold War, Fortnite, Valorant, and Doom Eternal. First up in COD Cold War, we got an average of over 60 FPS on medium-high settings, which is to be expected. The RX 570 is most certainly the bottleneck in this PC, and that's not a bad thing considering you can easily upgrade the graphics card to something higher end in the future with this i3 and have no problems. We've done a lot of i3 builds on the channel with things like the 5600 XT, which is definitely a way more powerful card than the RX 570, and the i3 does not hold that GPU back whatsoever. So with this PC, the main concept is you get decent performance now with a card that you can actually buy on the used market, and if you really want to fork over a lot of money, the new market, and easily be able to upgrade this with a better GPU in the future. Or if you're watching this right now in cards like the 5600 XT, the 1660 Super, or whatever new card from Nvidia that comes out in 2021 that is on that sort of level or a little bit better, and you can actually buy it, swap that card out with that card, and boom, you'll have even more performance, and this PC will work really well throughout 2021 because the i3-10100F is going to be a really viable option throughout the rest of the year. Next up in Fortnite, this goes to show that you can easily play esports titles with this PC right now, getting over 144 FPS on pro settings. Games like Fortnite, and the game we're going to be talking about in a minute, Valorant, and Rainbow Six Siege, and CSGO, and Rocket League, all those games are going to have no problems playing at over 100 FPS on optimized settings, or even max settings in a game like Valorant, where we actually ended up getting over 144 FPS, and this PC is great for that scenario. For $500, you really cannot complain having a PC that can play those kind of games out of the box on high settings or pro settings and be able to upgrade this thing years down the line to make this a multiple year-long PC that will work for you and have a platform that's very upgradable. Valorant ran perfectly smooth, sometimes even over 200 FPS on high settings. If you lower the settings, you can get over that if you want to, but this shows that you could get like a high refresh rate monitor, and it wouldn't be a bad idea being able to play at over 144 FPS in these esports titles. Will it be great for Cold War? No, probably not until you upgrade that graphics card, but you can still enjoy Cold War in games like Cold War, like Warzone, without any issues whatsoever. And the last game we decided to test for our AAA benchmark of choice is Doom Eternal, and on high settings we got 70 plus FPS. This PC could handle some newer AAA titles with optimized settings, so do keep that in mind. You're probably looking at 1080p low medium for games like Cyberpunk if you really want to play it to get 60 FPS. It will be kind of pushing it with this RX 570, but the RX 570 can still play pretty much any game you want if you temper your expectations really well and are willing to dive into the settings and do a little bit of optimizations. But for 1080p gaming, $500, this is a really awesome PC given everything going on in the world, and honestly, I can really not complain about it. I really do enjoy it, and I'm really happy we had the chance to put this PC together for 2021, and hopefully things get a lot better later in the year. So now that we finished the benchmarking section of today's video, how are we going to bring Jackson back in here to wrap this video up real quick?
Alright guys, so as you probably could have guessed, the 10100 can honestly handle a little bit of a better GPU. However, for $500, give or take, depending on how you get this 570, this is a really good build right now.
I'm actually very happy with this case from Mustex. I mean, this mesh front with the RGB fans all pre-installed, loaded up. It's actually pretty quiet considering how many fans are installed, and that magnetic side panel that you can actually open up with tempered glass at the price that it's at, and it's available on Amazon. It's really an awesome case that I don't think a lot of people are talking about. So if you're interested in building this PC or just using this case in general, links in the description down below. There are affiliate links. We highly suggest this case.
And lastly, we're actually going to be doing a setup with this PC. The total will be $800, so basically about $300 for peripherals. So make sure you subscribe to our channel to see that video soon.
So overall, very happy with this PC build. Once again, links in the description down below if you want to pick up any of these PC parts. And let us know down below if you have any PC recommendations for 2021. We're always going to be doing PC builds, and right now it's kind of a weird time to do PC build videos. But if you guys have any particular builds that we might be able to do, let us know in the comment section down below.
So if you guys haven't already, don't forget to check out our other 2 YouTube channels and also our twitch.tv/toastybros. And do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
And we'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.
Go Bobby.
Bye-bye.